we're going to talk now about renovating these pastures and 4 methods to renovate, and more importantly, some reasons for failure, and most importantly at the end, a few slides on first year management, which is critical to keeping that stand vigorous and keep plants from fading away and other plants from coming in. So like all the other presentations, this is a committee effort. We spent quite a few hours on the phone, some of these talks, talking back and forth about options, and came to arrive at these slides. So again, 4 methods, establishment problems, and management that first year. So let's go through the 4 methods. We'll have spray, smother, spray. This is with a summer smother crop. So this is the Cadillac or Rolls-Royce renovation method. This is sort of the gold standard. This is the way to wipe that slate clean and utilize those summer smother crops and 2 sprays to totally eliminate that toxic fescue and get the ground ready. So this is the one most recommend and we go with. All of these slides will have a typical distribution of tall fescue growth. The 2/3 in the spring, 1/3 in the fall. Forage production slumps off in the summer, and your timeline on the bottom. And we'll insert these management cartoons as we go through. So this spray, smother, spray method, and you've got, for the first 3 methods, each state provides a calendar for that in your handouts, that you can walk through these timelines with a little more detail for each specific state. So first spray, typically before seed head production, boot stage or earlier, to kill that old stand and start to clean up weeds. And those weeds may be anything from, winter annual weeds, which is a little late for that, but start to pick up some summer perennial weeds and other things. That kills out that stand. You've got dead fescue, hopefully, throughout there, and you can go back in and plant that summer smother crop here and get good summer forage production, those cow grazing days that Dr. Poore talked about earlier. This smother crop in the summer serves an important purpose. One, you get forage out of it, so you get some return off of that field and some forage that you need when that fescue forage is not growing very actively. But it also serves to shade those fescue plants and weaken them. Not only does it weaken them, but it encourages those surviving plants to put out growth, looking for sunlight, and gets those plants really exposed for your fall second spray, which kills all the volunteer seed that may have escaped here, gets those escape tillers that have grown up under that shade, also cleans up some summer annual weeds like crabgrass and other things, and kills your smother crop. The herbicide you use here for the second spray is also important. It's probably going to be glyphosate, but the rate you use is important as well. You're going to want to take this smother crop off and have as little residue there as you can, but this is your chance to get those fescue escapes. This is your chance to clean up Bermuda grass and get that cleaned off the slate as well. So second spray there, then after that second spray you plant your novel. Again, this is the gold standard. This is what everybody tends to steer you toward. It's also one of the more expensive methods. You've got multiple sprays, you've got multiple drill rentals if you don't have your own drill, and of course multiple trips across the field. Also very dependable, so it just takes some forward planning. Just a few photos here. After that first spray, dead fescue to no-till drill that smother crop in. Residue can be a problem on both ends of this. If you spray this, think about spring growth at boot stage. You've got a lot of material out there and a lot of residue potentially, so that can create some problems when you're no-tilling a smother crop in. Both sunlight, seed soil contact, insects, things like that. So that may need to be managed. It depends on your situation. But again, one thing that's discounted, and Reed brought this up, and Matt accounted for it in cow grazing days, this produces a lot of valuable forage, high quality forage, in a time of year where your other pastures probably aren't producing forage if you've got a fescue-based system, or even if you've got a fescue Bermuda grass-based system. This is a lot higher quality than that Bermuda grass is going to think about being in most cases, particularly if you go with a BMR sorghum Sudan or even a good leafy pearl millet. All right, so again, This is a variant, I'll be honest, I wasn't real familiar with before we started talking about this, and one that Craig indicates is used a lot more in Missouri. But the same concept, a spray, smother, spray concept with a winter smother crop. So again, and this, oddly enough, we've used this since we put this talk together a couple years ago at Clemson on a couple different situations. But if you miss this spring window here, you can still go with that first spray in the fall, and that again kills that old fescue, the toxic fescue, helps you to clean up those weeds, kills that stand from there on forward, and you go in and plant a winter smother crop, an annual crop, much like you would with the summer smother. What would these crops be? What would the most typical winter annual planted be? Ryegrass. Don't plant ryegrass. That's the one not to plant. All right. So I asked that question for a reason. Why wouldn't I plant ryegrass?
It'll make the seed head and come back forever and ever and ever.
That's going to be your most problematic weed for the next fall planting. A lot of competition and no real way to take it out. So avoid annual ryegrass for this winter smother crop. Go back in with a cereal rye or a wheat or an oats. I typically like, rye for grazing is fantastic. If you're gonna harvest it at all for hay, maybe an oat. So we've used triticale and barley and harvested as baleage at the dairy at Clemson. So again, a good valuable smother crop. Second spray here in the spring cleans up those fescue escapes, wipes out your smother crop, wipes out those other weeds. And in the Missouri system, you're leaving it fallow in the summer and going back in a summer spray, in a late summer spray, killing it and planting your novels. I suspect, and we've had that opportunity, particularly when we plant rye or triticale, that we've got enough window here to go back in with a summer smother crop and further take advantage of that. And again, much like the 25% tall fescue system is a gateway drug, these annuals also tend to be, people are resistant to these annuals, and they plant that first summer pearl millet crop and it's limed up for planting that tall fescue. You fertilize it well, you get this giant flush of forage. These tend to hook people, and these stay in a system for a full year sometimes as they get to renovate. And that's important. That's good. You build up some soil health, to use maybe a four-letter word for some, but you build up some activity in that soil. You build up some fertility. You let that lime react, and you're ready to roll. So a good system that's not used a whole lot down here, but probably could be used more. Important: avoid annual ryegrass. That's kind of the take-home message from this. Some photos from Missouri, Brookfield, Missouri. Fescue sprayed first time September 4. There's some seedlings coming up there. Cereal rye September 11th, and on that in early November. If you did that here, you would typically be on it by Thanksgiving, in most cases, grazing that. In this, again, they grazed and hayed throughout the spring. Good hay crop, maybe a little mature in this situation. Craig's not, I don't see Craig. I'd poke some fun at him if they had a good forage specialist joke or something like that. But harvested this May 17th as dry hay, and pulled off 50,000 pound bales on 7 acres. So a good yield there. Good valuable forage, and you can see pulling this off at hay has a great advantage. You've got a nice, clean, no residue-free seed bed to go back into. In our case, I would like you to go back into that with a pearl millet, come back in the fall. So, all right. So just a simple variant of the summer smother. You've got a winter smother with or without a summer smother in a fall plant. Here's it's not novel anymore, but Nick and I worked on this at Georgia in the, long time ago. We won't go into that. But it was new then, I thought. But this is a simple shortcut method. As we did some surveys and talked to people about why novels weren't being incorporated more, the one reason we kept getting back was, it's a lengthy replacement process. You've got to spray a couple times and put a smother crop in. I've got to rent a drill at least twice. I don't want to go through all that. And it required a lot of forward planning. You had to back up months to do this. So we came up with this, what we deemed spray, wait, spray method. And it allows you to do almost all the work 6 weeks before your planting window, almost all of it. So again, a simple method. The only thing that requires you to think about in the spring is not to allow seed heads to be produced, not to allow viable seed to be produced. So this needs to be mowed in the spring once, sometimes twice, depending on the timing, to prevent seed head production, viable seed production. And if you get a seed head to come up and it's not pollinated and have a viable seed, you can still clip it. You just don't want those viable seed produced and on the ground. Clip it here. You can graze it all summer. Then you can hay it in the summer. You could hay it in the spring. Just don't let those seed heads be produced. Come back into this first spray timing is also important. Look at your ideal planting date, and if that fescue is actively growing, back up 6 weeks. So in our case, we'd like you to plant mid-September. Back it up 6 weeks, 1st of August, hit this with 1.5 quarts of Roundup if it's pure fescue. If it's got Bermuda grass in it, jack that right up and smoke that Bermuda grass. So that first spray is really important to be 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, ideally 6 weeks before planting. And I'll talk about why here in just a second. That kills the fescue. Come back with a second spray immediately before planting, the day before planting if you want. Hit that with another 1.5 quarts of Roundup. This picks up any volunteer seedlings. If you miss some strips here, if it's rained, it'll get the escape tillers, which are there, even though it may not look like them, they're there. And it'll, really importantly, it picks up a lot of winter annual weeds that have germinated. That's why that 6 week period is important. You're going to pick up a little bitty henbit. You're going to pick up those small annual weeds that you may not even realize are there. And timing this at a 6 week interval can often prevent a spring need for an application of 2,4-D or something like that. And you go in, you can go in as, I think the label's 24 hours, Jay, to re-enter, but as soon as that Roundup dries, you can get in and drill that into that seed bed, into that dormant, dead fescue. All right, so a simpler method. It's all about this timing and preventing seed heads. So.
Does chaparral have a place in there?
No, we were asked this yesterday if you could suppress these seed heads with chaparral in the spring, and you only get about 75-85% seed head suppression. You're going to leave. Yeah, you're going to leave some seed heads, so probably not.
So
probably not.
Better as a management technique on the existing fescue.
Yes, yeah, and Craig will talk about that this afternoon. Yep. So again, this is I think this is Missouri data comparing spray smother spray with the spray weight spray method. Similar. This is a point step method after established. Similar stands of new fescue, a little lower in this case. Very low infection rates of old fescue and similar bare ground. Nick and I did some work in plots and on producer fields, and ours are actually flipped. We've got a little higher in the spray weight spray, a little lower in the spray smother spray, just because of residue and no tilling that into this summer smother crop. So, but at any rate, very good in both cases, whether it's spray smother spray or spray weight spray method. A few photos of these. This is some work we did at Clemson on a producer farm. This is after the first spray, and you can see a living, sick but living tall fescue plant there. There's another one up here. Even though it looks like you've smoked that field, don't skip the second application. Don't skip the second application. As tempting as it is, you're going to look across that field and say it's all dead. Do not skip the second application. That 1.5 quarts of Roundup is the best investment you'll ever make. So here's that same field. I think this was late March. In this spray weight spray method, they're flash grazing some heifers across this particular field. In this case, this particular producer did 7 fields for us, and they all kind of varied. It was an on-farm type trial. He had a lot of excess fescue residue here, and he sprayed, killed it, burned it off to remove all that residue, and then hit regrowth again a few weeks later. It's a little longer than 6 week interval in that case, but still very successful and very low. We went back in all these pastures and sampled them, and had an infection rate of 0.5% to 2.5, and Nick pointed out the first day that 2.5 was in the corners where you couldn't really get it sprayed very well. So those infection rates are very, very low in these situations. So a good method, and this fits a lot of situations, I think, where you don't want to plant that summer smother crop for whatever reason, whether that's don't want the increased risk, don't want the increased cost, don't want to find a drill a couple different times, don't get it planned in the spring but clipped your pastures, those types of things. The last one is simply a prepared seed bed, and the plots you'll see this afternoon were in a prepared seed bed with Ben, and it does fit from time to time. This is a clean tilled area on that same farm that I talked about earlier. And here's a spray weight spray, a big skip here. Again, another reason for that second application. This is a skip where a nozzle got clogged or they turned. I don't know what happened there, but a big area of toxic fescue there waiting for that second spray. These clean till applications work real good in certain situations. Ben used it in an area that had been stumped and cleared, I believe, and just wanted to smooth it up. That's exactly the reason this producer used it. He sprayed that fescue out, killed it, and then came back in and had some terraces he wanted to take out so he could hay it if he wanted to, and tilled that up and smoothed it up. You get excellent, I mean, you can't get a much better stand than clean till. It's just that most of our soils aren't very amenable to that in this area. A lot of times on these slopes that ends up in the creek. So, and of course additional expense. We've been asked every day so far how to renovate these pastures without herbicides. And we still don't have a good answer for that. So it's going to take multiple, unless Dennis, you haven't been with us. If you got one, I'd be happy to hear it. But multiple tillage is the only move. There you go. I like that. I like that. So it's really hard to take out this toxic fescue without glyphosate or, and if
Found a place to move to that doesn't have it as well.
go to the
Crop ground.
yeah crop ground or timber, and you're still going to use a herbicide. Yeah, that's a good point. So again, good stands in both these situations. So, and I want to point out this particular producer we started with him in 04-ish, and he's renovated 100% of his acres owned, and all of his rented acres. He's got 10-year leases on those, and then after doing all that and getting his calving rate up for spring calving, switched to fall calving, so that he could stocker calves in the summer if he had adequate forage. So kind of moving the pieces of the puzzle around to make it fit your operation. But his calving rates significantly increased on that spring calving herd before he switched over. All right, those are the four methods, really three methods with herbicide and tillage to wrap it up. Let's talk quickly about establishment problems, and I've got some very busy slides that I'll kind of scan through that the committee pulled these out of this classic Barnes, Nelson, Collins, and Moore textbook that we used to require all of our forage students to buy for $200, I think it is now for both volumes. But these are nice summaries of problems that happen when you have or causes when these things happen. There's these live seed doesn't germinate because it's dormant seed or not enough moisture, or poor quality seed. There's a whole nother list about what happens. Why do they die immediately after germination? And I won't linger long on these because they're in your notes. But there's this whole list of soil coverage and crusted soil surface, or maybe it's herbicide carryover or fertilizer burn. So lots of different reasons here with that. And sometimes they come up and die or come up in establishment and die. And again, reasons here for those, broad reasons. Insects and pests are a big one with some fescue. Much more common is undesirable pH and low fertility. We've seen that multiple times in troubleshooting, particularly when you go into timberland, clear that timber, throw out some triple 19, drill that in, fescue comes up, turns purple, it's gone. I put phosphorus out, it can't be a phosphorus deficiency. Your pH is 4.4, bud, it's phosphorus deficiency. It can't pick it up. So So those soil tests are really, really critical. So here's kind of a summary on the main reasons we've seen those novel endophyte seedlings fail. And one is too much competition, or trying to drill novels into existing thin stands of toxic fescue. We get that question. We've gotten that question every day this week as well. We've got to eliminate that competition and eliminate shading and water competition from other tillers, existing tillers. Bad seed, that's not typically a problem if you buy Alliance seed that we'll talk about here in just a second, and Nick will really stress. These seed companies, all the seed companies in the room are reputable companies. Their reputation's on the line when they sell you seed, and it's all tested and approved. A big problem is too deep, and particularly in tilled situations, it's really easy to sink that drill a little too deep and get a poor stand. And there's some things you can do. We'll see that. We kind of went non-conventional with the test strips that Ben planted and used a conventional drill and a chain drag to keep those high because it was pretty fluffy seed bed. But this is a real common problem, even with no-till drills in sods. Really tempting to sink those big old heavy drills and get it too deep. Occasionally see carryover herbicide issues from broadleaf herbicides in particular. It happens, but not frequently. Try to keep legumes out of the mix until that fescue is well established. Don't try. Do keep legumes out of the mix until that fescue is well established. When I was still at Georgia, right near where the workshop's going to be tomorrow, at a large purebred cattle operation, they put several hundred acres. I've never told you this, Dennis. They put several hundred acres of novel fescue in gosh, it would have been 04-ish, something like that. You know what I'm talking about, Chris? Big stand failure, and they had some serious legume competition. It just got shaded out, and they thought they were doing the right thing, and the fescue came up, the clover really came up, it shaded out that fescue, and you're left with a beautiful stand of white clover. So leave those legumes out until the fescue is well established. This also eliminates all weed control options you have that following spring. You have no 2,4-D, no picloram, no aminopyrrolid. If you need to clean up henbit or chickweed or anything else, you're done. You can't. Well, you can give up your clover. You've wasted the money on the clover seed. And soil fertility we've already addressed. pH is super critical, and that leads to phosphorus deficiency if it's too low in most cases, or a lot of times phosphorus isn't put out. We don't typically have a phosphorus issue in these areas with broilers or turkeys, so that's typically okay. Sometimes pH can be an issue. Litter takes care of that a lot of times too, but test it to be sure. Other cautionary things: don't spray if you've had a really dry summer and you're at that August 1st 6-week spray and your fescue looks like this. Hold off. Wait for a shower. Wait for that to green up so you can get a good kill, good contact with green tissue. Kind of delay that. Be aware that these volunteer seedlings do happen, and you can clean those up really easily. You just got to know they're there. But once you drill that novel fescue, if you've got annual ryegrass between the rows or you've got toxic fescue between the rows, it's like that clover. You're trapped. Only you can't take them out. You've got to take everything out at that time. Just to touch on the Alliance approved seed, Nick will hit on this, so I'm going to skim through this quickly. But look for that tag. Look for this logo on that tag. Every company in this room, all of these commercial varieties that you'll see today, they're all in the Alliance, and this logo means that you have less than 5% off types. You have greater than 70% living endophyte in that seed, which is what you're buying. You're not necessarily buying the seed, you're buying a living endophyte. And that's there by the sticker. So that's what the sticker looks like, or the logo looks like there. And I won't linger on this too long because I know that Dr. Hill's going to talk about it. You do need to calibrate the drill for each variety or for each planting. Jay will talk more about this in the field this afternoon when we get out there. We've kind of juggled the schedule up just a bit to accommodate that. And also important when you're calibrating that drill to run a few test rows and really check that planting depth, dig the seed up, look for visible seed on the surface. You want that. You want to see a little seed on top of the ground. If it's all underneath the ground, you're too deep, more than likely. And look at that press wheel pressure. You want proper relief where when you go over hills and through dips that pressure's, the press wheel's good for firming up the seed, but that relief is good where it's consistently delivering at the right depth over different terrain. And of course, moisture, dry and wet effect. This has been the problem this past year, and this also may really encourage you to renovate. I mean, I think we're going to see a lot more summer annuals planted this year from torn up pastures, just hay feeding in winter. This is an opportunity now to, in the next 4, 5, 6 weeks, clean up the tall fescue that's still living and go in with a summer smother crop because it's torn up anyway, and then come back in the fall and reestablish. So I think we can make some lemons into lemonade with these damaged pastures this spring. It's been a rough winter. And we've already talked about soil fertility. Just a couple more slides, but these are really important, and these are where, as say, I've made a lot of mistakes. I've screwed things up, and my one of the ex-county agents calls it street cred. You got street cred. I don't want any more street cred. I want things to work, but I think. Let's call it experience, but we've learned some lessons, and we knew some of these things, and we've seen these on producer farms as well. The Alliance group recommendation is to hay the first year, which I've got mixed feelings about. I'll be very honest about that. I do think this is a good practice, but I want to add 2 caveats, and these are mistakes that I've seen and one that I've made. It's great to hay the first year. This allows you a lot of control. But the 2 things you really want to control are cutting height. With these first year hay cuttings, you want 3 or 4 inches. It's too tempting, and we've lost stands of toxic, established 30-year-old stands of toxic fescue by shaving them in June with a disc cutter, and then it turning off dry. So imagine what that does to a first year stand of $3.50 novel tall fescue. So cut it at the right height. Second thing, cut it at the right time. So don't wait too late. For that same reason, it gets hot and dry. More importantly, it self-shades. So if it gets this tall and mature seed head on it, what's the bottom of that plant seeing? Darkness, no sunlight. So when you cut it, a lot of times it'll lay over. It gets clumpy, self-shades. You cut it off, even if you cut it at the right height, you end up with a very clumpy stand. Crabgrass comes in, winter annual weeds come in. So take it from me, folks. I've done both. So
I would go a step further, John, and say don't cut it during the summer period.
I like, if you graze it or hay it, and I got this from Jane Parrish at Mississippi State. June 1st, put a chain and a lock on the gate and don't open it till fall. So stay off of it that first year. It's cheap insurance. So, but you're right.
I think that's right. I think a little light grazing is probably okay, but,
yeah.
But definitely do not cut hay off
Of late.
late.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
That first cutting is fine.
Yeah. Timeliness and cutting height. Very, very important. But otherwise a good practice because you're not going to, you can overcut just like you can overhay. Thanks, Craig. So good proper cutting. You've got good drill rows, good regrowth here. You can see those there. Do not overgraze. We don't have to talk much about that because we just talked about it with cutting height. Same thing happens here. John Fike, one thing I pulled out of his talk Monday is that fescue toxin acts like a brake, and as you get lower and lower there, those cattle slow down. It's most toxic at the crown, and you can put all the cattle in the world on a Kentucky 31 stand and not graze it into the ground. These novels, they'll keep eating. There's no toxin, there's no break. So they're going to graze them right down to the ground going into summer. You don't want that. You don't want it any year, but you really don't want it the first year. Two more slides. This one, keep the field clean. Getting back to your question, don't feed hay on these new stands or any of the old stands. We talked about establishing these with, what does it take to establish? Disturbance or seed soil contact, moisture, and fertility. And seed. We've got an old mature toxic hay bale here. Lots of seedlings coming up. We've got seed soil contact, soil disturbance, urine and manure, fertility, and water. Perfect conditions. So keep your toxic hay off of these fields in hay rings or rolling them out. This is a hay ring, but rolling them out, grazing it down, that's adding to your trouble. Last slide. And we talked about moving cattle from field to field. They can move seed, but that window's narrow when you've got seed heads and viable seed on it. This is an old Auburn study that Steve Schmidt did where they dosed or pulled these cattle off pastures. They might have dosed them. I need to go back to that study. And looked at these graduate students. You guys got it good. Y'all are just killing lambs. These graduate students were collecting all the manure, sieving that manure, collecting the seed, germinating it out, and looking at that and looking at that. So no more complaints, students. So, and they measured the infected seed in the feces, and you can see by day 2 after removal, it's essentially gone. And I did some calculations. This is like 0.4 pounds of seed that are coming through. And if you've got a cow to 3 acres, that's 0.15-ish pounds of seed per acre in that case if you're moving into. But it can happen. You definitely don't want to go straight from if you can avoid it.